I'm Jaisal Noor for the Real News Network. Working from home, social distancing as much as possible, and I hope you are too. The coronavirus pandemic, with over 200,000 confirmed cases and 8,000 fatalities reported so far across the world. In the US, there's 6,500 cases and 115 deaths documented, but experts warn a slow response and an extreme shortage of tests means that number is likely much, much higher. Authorities are taking steps to address the crisis, like bailing out the stock market. But little has been done to assist already marginalized communities, especially those facing incarceration, like those in immigration detention. Even before the pandemic, detainees were impacted by the spread of infectious disease due to overcrowding, unhygienic conditions, and more. The New York Times is reporting the Trump administration will use the crisis to push some of its harshest policies yet, including immediately deporting asylum seekers without due process. And according to the ACLU of Maryland, a judge in Baltimore is refusing to postpone court dates despite calls from the Centers for Disease Control and the governor's office, ordering social distancing to slow the spread of COVID-19. Well, now joining me to discuss this is Nick Steiner. He's a staff attorney for the ACLU of Maryland. Thanks so much for joining us, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
So you're working from home as well, and there's a
trying to socially distance myself as well.
Yeah, and so there's a consensus in the public health community and even most government officials. We need to stay away from each other as much as possible to avoid the spread of COVID-19, the disease caused by the coronavirus. But describe what's happening in immigration courts in Baltimore right now.
Yeah, so actually there is news today that not just in Baltimore, but in immigration courts across the country that have closed. And so, but before that happened, we had sent in an administrative complaint against Judge Crosland, who is an immigration judge in Baltimore, who, what we've been hearing from a lot of immigration practitioners who had been appearing before him recently in the past few days, is that he seemed to be substituting his judgment over that of public health officials and that of the calls for social distancing. The Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, issued a state of emergency, shut down all non-essential businesses, and the CDC is also ordering that, issuing guidance that gatherings of 50 people or more not happen. Yet Judge Crosland was requiring people to still appear before him to hear their immigration hearings. And so basically what he had been doing was forcing immigrants and their lawyers to either choose between going to their hearing and risking their health, or risking just giving up any immigration relief that they have. And that actually happened to one person who didn't end up going to his hearing because he didn't want to risk contracting the coronavirus. And instead of Judge Crosland postponing the hearing as this individual's immigration lawyer had requested, instead he said, no, look, we're going to go ahead with it. And since the person wasn't there, he ordered the person removed in absentia, essentially meaning that because he wasn't there, he's given up any claims to relief. So he ordered the person to be deported. So even though the immigration courts as of today have shut down, Judge Crosland's decisions and actions have lasting consequences. And so this person's immigration lawyer is going to have to appeal.
So it's obviously a positive development that these courts are shut down, but talk about the conditions that detainees face in detention. We know they face deplorable conditions. We've all seen the images of the children in cages. We know they're already susceptible to the spread of disease. It's common in jails across the country, especially in immigration detention.
Yes, exactly. And I think prisons and immigration detention centers and jails, I think, are a very concerning place for the coronavirus to enter. Everybody is in pretty close quarters. There isn't much room to move around. If an outbreak occurs in an immigrant detention center or a prison, it puts not just, I mean, it puts the jail staff at risk. And so what would likely happen is that the jail will shut down and everyone would go into isolation. In immigrant detention centers, I mean, we have to remember that those are civil detention centers. They're not being held on any criminal charges. They're being held by ICE, so that ICE can figure out whether or not they're going to deport the person, and has nothing to do with any kind of criminal violation. So what a lot of advocates across the country are calling for, and in fact the ACLU national office has sued a detention center in Washington State. It is that these concerns are real. The global pandemic is real, and especially in places where people are confined in small spaces and the nature of a jail is that you can't socially distance yourself. And so for people who don't pose any public safety risk should be released, and ICE has that authority, and they could do it today if they wanted to.
And so you talked about the calls to release release some detainees. We've seen that call. The ACLU is part of that call for prisoners as well, especially those that, yeah, like you said, don't pose any risk. You know, people that are old or already facing medical conditions. You know, let them get out. And so, despite all these conditions, we're still seeing ICE raids in LA. There's reports of children being transported on airplanes, children in detention. We saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez question an ICE official at LaGuardia Airport a few days ago. So talk about what role that grassroots communities can do, because we know, throughout the Obama administration, there was, and the Trump administration, there's been these mass demonstrations, at airports and, around the country. I know we've been covering the protests here at the ICE office in downtown Baltimore for years now. But people can't really be gathering on this scale anymore. Talk about what people can do in this moment.
I think it's really important for individuals to be calling government officials, to be calling your senators, your representatives. There needs to be some accountability being placed on ICE. When ICE conducts raids, they're putting at risk the immigrants themselves. They're putting themselves at risk. What needs to be happening is there needs to be a call to stop ICE raids. There needs to be a call to release people from immigration detention. The public's health should be the priority at this point, and so ICE needs to be stopping their raids.
All right, Nick Steiner, a staff attorney for the ACLU of Maryland. Thank you for joining us from your self-quarantine, from your social distancing at home, and urging everyone, of course, as much as possible. It's not possible for everyone, but if it's possible, please stay at home. Please avoid contact, and you're helping keep everyone safe. Nick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us at the Real News Network.